rather in a city to stay in. Whatever you think about Gdynia is always that you rush in, you do your business, and you rush out somehow. And the development over the last years has proved to comply with this principle by allowing lots of urban sprawl, which goes out into the suburban areas. So Henning will start now to explain the principles of how we see the reconnection, the re-energizing concept, and I later will go a bit more specific into the results of the project we actually foresee for the future here in one small part of the large waterfront development areas.
Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, Michael, for allowing me to intrude on the Economic Forum for the second time. Last year I was invited, this year was a surprise guest. I'm glad you still allow me to take the floor. I think also I want to commend you on the structure you've given this panel, not because we're the last, but more so because I think two speakers before this presentation already shows, Thomas is alluding to as well, that joining forces in a room like this in various locations in the world and sharing knowledge and insight on these issues bring out a whole host of interesting points, and I think the two first presentations have done that very successfully. I want to specifically comment on Jason's thoughts on the contextual potential. I think the whole Olympic legacy idea is a bold and daring but also very, very precise take on how to look at a city and really try to take out the best that's there, acknowledging the challenges that are there as well, and using planning as a tool to try and tie these things together. And I think the Olympic, and I'm sure it's going to be a success, I think the whole setup is so much more promising than many other Olympic parks we've seen over the last many, many decades in this endeavor. And I think it brings out valuable lessons also for Gdynia in terms of looking at contextual potential and not simply choosing to eradicate everything that's there because times have changed, but truly looking at the potentials and building on them. I think that was a magnificent lesson that Jason showed us there. And also I think that Professor Lawrence points on the importance of the public realm is worthwhile dwelling on. It's one of the things that we've been working with in many of the cities that are listed here and others as well, and something that sometimes gets overlooked in our zest for bold new plans and developments, that actually what is going to be the base of the success of any endeavor in the city is the quality of the public realm, because that is where we're going to meet each other. That is the space of democracy, it's the space of commerce, and so on and so forth. So the importance of the public realm is really crucial. I also think that Professor Lawrence struck a chord in saying that scale matters. You have to acknowledge the scale. So London is one thing, Gdansk is one thing, Gdynia is another thing, Copenhagen is a fourth thing, and so on and so forth. So even if many of these cities share the same premise, namely that once there was a waterfront, once there was an active harbour, now that industry is either dispersed, been taken out of the city or moved elsewhere or totally taken out of business, the scale defines the potentials that are there and is very important to acknowledge. So you cannot take one project from one city and simply transport it over to another city. You have to be looking very detailed at what is at hand to understand how to develop it most qualitatively. We have been asked to help LandPro give some insights on the public space and public life aspects of a site that they have acquired in the city of Gdynia, and we have done that over the last year or so, together with other of the consultants to LandPro, who have then developed the actual project, and Thomas is going to come on more in detail into that in a minute. we have looked at the things that we think a city needs to observe. We have done it in this case not for the city, which we usually do. We do work for cities in many of our projects, trying actually to prepare the grounds for either a city endeavor or a private development endeavor, but so that the city is armed with an understanding of where it is in its development and what quality potentials it has. In this case, we have worked for the developer who has had that same ambition, and I think that's worthwhile to dwell on. That's not always the case, but it was here. So in essence, the land prop services have invested in trying to make a better understanding of the potential of the cities beyond their site. And that's our contribution here. We are hoping that we may be able to develop this further. This is only indicatory. It has not been possible to do a full in-depth study of the city, and that's not for a private enterprise to take care of as it is. It's for a city to take care of. But we have indicated potentials in the city for the developer here to show how the city could benefit from various developments. Also, I think some projects and ideas mentioned in the two previous presentations were very large scale. I think we come from a background of trying to influence and inform projects from the micro scale more so, trying to figure out what people do in these spaces. And I think again Jason indicated the need for these two ends to come together in projects, and that's what we've been trying to do here. So once there was a waterfront, which is really the topic of the two previous speakers as it were, here in Gdynia, what we have been trying to look at is some of the potentials that we have found exist in Gdynia. This is an image from the waterfront of the area, and it struck us after the first visits that there was a whole pearls on a string theme to be developed here. There were things already going on in Gdynia on the waterfront which we found to have a high quality. The promenade along the waterfront, the seafront, the beach situation that we have. We have the piers where there are different plans. We have the cultural forum, which will also be sort of one of the pearls on this string, and there are several more. And they really come together on a site in the middle of the city that we found was at present a barrier between the city and the waterfront. This is something that we saw in many of Jason's projects as well. The harbour activity used to be a workplace, but it also in many ways was a barrier between the actual life of the city at large and the potentials of the waterfront location. And that's really what one should begin to build on and expand on in this case. We think also that we learned that Washingtona, which used to be the old sort of barrier between city and harbour, was a very important road in the city that needed to be understood better. But we also thought that tying the waterfront into the city fabric was a very important aspect. These are just indicatory sketches indicating both problems, challenges and potentials. To our experience, Gdynia seemed to be a city that had lived its life parallel to the water. The commercial streets and the traffic streets were running parallel to the harbour, to the waterfront. This is not strange, it's easily understood why this is so. But the opportunity, of course, when the harbour activity then moves away, is to begin to tie in the city with the waterfront in a very different way. Here we've indicated with the orange line some of the streets that now take on a larger importance, in our view, for the development of the central city of Gdynia, tying the railway station to the harbour front. and also creating connections towards the waterfront that have been, in our view, overlooked in the planning hitherto. And also other potentials arising from the site on the waterfront here, tying together some green spaces, some existent, some planned in other projects along this area. And this offers new opportunities also for leisure activities along the waterfront. And really what we thought was very important indeed. I'm not showing here a plan of the waterfront development as it is today with the Gemini building and the sea towers. But those of you who know the city will know that these are two very large structures dominating their surroundings. But really what we learned in Gdynia is that there is